Hey you guys, Kimagay6, aka Raymond. Welcome. Let's have a little chat. Well, I'm doing the dishes right now, but let's elaborate. Okay? I want to have a little chat with you guys on as you guys can see by the title, Spider-Man. That is not going to be in the MCU anymore. Well, guys, as you guys may have seen through the news yesterday, that uh, Disney and Sony have not been able to come to an agreement to the future of the web slinger himself, Spider-Man. Well, what can I say about this? Well, I can say a lot of things. It is really funny on how things are perspiring on the rights to Spider-Man. I mean, think about this for a second, guys. It took Disney almost a year, or maybe it might be a year and 2 months. It took to get the rights from 20th Century Fox, which they bought the rights to 20th Century Fox. Now 20th Century Fox is now Disney's, and Disney now has the rights to X-Men, Fantastic Four, with the Silver Surfer and all the and Galactus and Deadpool. A lot of the villains on the Fantastic Four side. But the reason why I bring that up is because it's crazy how Sony has backed out on a deal with Disney to have equal rights on Spider-Man. Well, guys, I want to talk about that. As you guys may have known, back in I would say, in the early 2000s, we have seen the evolution of Spider-Man. We've seen Spider-Man's 1, 2, and 3, which we finally see the character in the big screen, which we haven't seen much on all of the Marvel heroes. We've seen Blade. We've seen, well, believe it or not, guys, 20th Century Fox, this was known as the 21st Century Fox, believe it or not, they created Captain America, which was a big flop. The reason why it was a big flop, because of the costume. The reason why I say costume is because if you would compare to the costume that we've seen in the Marvel cinemas, all the way from Captain America all the way up to Endgame, we were able to see a better looking costume. But this costume was depicted in the classic comic books. But here's what made it stand out as the worst costume ever made: the ears. The ears were literally sticking out of the latex suit. You could see the ears just flapping around with the feathers on top, with the feathers top right here, that never moved and never was ripped off. So I have to say that was one of the worst. I actually seen it, believe it or not, guys. The Red Skull was poorly made. It looked like a lot of latex was put on this guy. Looked like it just exploded on him, and later became one of the worst Marvel films ever made. Now, there was another Marvel film that 21st Century Fox has actually created, and it was the Fantastic Four. It was never released. Now, the reason why it was never released because the rights were bought by, if I remember correctly, it was bought out by Sony. Not by Sony, by 20th Century Fox, if I heard that correctly. Now, the reason why this movie stands out as being also a worse Fantastic Four film was the way it looks. Now, the Stone Soldier, I'm just letting you know, it looked like almost the same as the one as we see in the comics, and despite that, we see in the 2004 version, and also I think it's 2004 or 2003. No, 2005. Take that back. And I think 2006 or 7 we've seen Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, which we've seen an updated one, which was way better. And we've seen these movies evolve into something that was great, but it turned out to be lousy. Although Marvel has been getting out with Blade and Daredevil and everything else, Spider-Man was the one movie that did great in the box office throughout the years. We've seen part 1, where we've seen the origin on Peter Parker, and also we've seen a cool villain, the Green Goblin, played by the one and only William Dafoe, which that was was the greatest villains ever created. And then we've seen part 2, where we've seen Doc Ock, and we've seen how Peter Parker was going through life as a hero. He didn't want to be a hero anymore, so he quit. And because he was losing his powers, because he wasn't being focused on a lot of things. Of course, mainly one thing, and you know what that is, Mary Jane. Finding out that she was getting married and she was doing extravagant things. He wanted to be there for her, but she couldn't because, as you know, he has responsibilities. As Uncle Ben once said, with great power comes great responsibility, and that was the main concern for Spider-Man. But then part 3, where we actually found out that he was wearing a black symbiote, which we were hoping that we were going to see a great superhero film with Venom. And of course, we've seen how Venom was introduced. It was a lousy looking character, really lousy. But I'm not putting down Topher Grace, who played Eddie Brock and also Venom. Venom was so skinny, and although he had the spider emblem, which was like in the comics, but he wasn't ripped. He wasn't like big and buff like how it was in the comics. And although Tom Hardy was able to do the role, which he was the perfect Eddie Brock, which Sony had chosen, and that was one of the greatest choices ever made. But when they created Venom, it actually flopped a bit, but it did really good. But Venom lacked the actual the symbol, which I think that's the reason why it didn't do very well in the box office because of that. But Spider-Man 3 flopped, and we were never going to see Spider-Man again. But then fast forward to 2009 or 10, we've seen the Amazing Spider-Man, where we're seeing a new story arc of Andrew Garfield playing Peter Parker, and then we've seen Emma Stone playing Gwen Stacy, and we've seen no Mary Jane and everything else, and it was pretty clear that this was going to be a great great movie series that Sony was introducing to us. Oh, there's one thing I like to remember. I want you guys to know. Sam Raimi, best known for doing Evil Dead, and the Evil Dead trilogy, he was the one who directed all those movies, but there was supposed to be a part 4. John Malkovich, and I would say, I think an Oscar-nominated actor, he was supposed to play Vulture, and we're supposed to see Anne Hathaway as the Black Cat. And that movie never came to fruition because of scheduled dates and all the actors had different jobs to do. And then fast forward, we see as Anne Hathaway couldn't be the Black Cat, we've seen her become Catwoman in The Dark Knight Rises, which is a different story arc, completely different, because this is Marvel and that's DC. Now, let's talk about that for a sec, because after that, Part 2, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it actually did lousy because we're seeing all these... as you guys may have known, the reason why Spider-Man 3 flopped is because we had 2 villains. We had Sandman and Venom. Sandman was perfect, but the reason why it did terrible is because of Venom, of course, because the way he was portrayed and how he looked. And now, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we had about 2 villains. We had a new Green Goblin and Electro, which was too much. We've seen all these characters pop up from the comics, like Felicia Hardy and Ravencroft, he was the guy who owned the prison. And then we've seen in Oscorp all the Sinister Six costumes and everything, which is still shelved. It was actually canceled. So within all that, the movie flops, and now we had to get a new Spider-Man because it was needed to be introduced. So fast forward to 2016. 2016, guys, we have seen Captain America Civil War. After when we saw the second trailer that was released, besides the first one, we've seen Iron Man fight Captain America and Winter Soldier at the same time. We've seen Spider-Man for the first time, played by the one and only Tom Holland. Now, Tom Holland was the perfect choice. Oh, I thought someone was here. Tom Holland was the perfect choice for Spider-Man because, as Stan Lee has put it, he looked exactly like the kid that he created from the comics, and it was a perfect role. And this guy, I actually read that he found out he got the role by Instagram, and it was funny. And that's a good way to find out you got a role. And we saw how that movie was great. The Russo brothers were the ones who directed it. Their first directed film of the Marvel Universe was The Winter Soldier, and that still has been handed down, has been voted as the #1 best sequel in Marvel movies. And I'm sure you guys see it because we had great action, great villains, and also a lot of storylines that was coming up to it. But as you know, for Civil War, seeing Spider-Man for the first time in the MCU was going to show big changes in the future. So, after when that was done, we've seen the post-credit scenes on Spider-Man holding a device that has a hologram of the Spider-Man logo, which we've seen that Spider-Man is coming back with new films. We've seen Homecoming, which was a great film. We've seen a classic Marvel villain, the Vulture, which was one of the greatest, and although there's chickens out there, so sorry about that. We've seen how he was evolving, but then when the Infinity War came, and also Endgame, it was shown that Spider-Man was going to be, well, like being in the new team of the Avengers. Now, guys, in the new Avengers, which I want to point something out, because the new Avengers is a good part of, after when the Avengers movie was done, Endgame, although we've lost Iron Man, and then we lost Captain America, there was supposed to be some new heroes coming in for the new Avengers. Now, let me show you, because here's what makes it difficult, because of one reason. Now, Spider-Man was supposed to be in the new Avengers. It had Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Thor, a new Captain America, which as you know, Anthony Mackie is going to play him after we see the Disney Plus series, and we had Wolverine. Now, it's been said that if they're ever going to do a Wolverine film, standalone film, the Russo brothers are going to direct it. And I think that's a pretty good idea that they should do that. So, guys, in the new Avengers, Spider-Man is supposed to be in this series. And after seeing what's going on between Disney and Sony has pulled out. But I have read that there are still negotiating. So, it's already been a day. It's today. It's already been a day after that little fiasco of what's going on. Fans are getting upset, and I'm sure you guys have seen on Instagram that Tom Holland and Zendaya actually unfollowed Sony on Twitter and also on Instagram. Now, Tom Holland actually admitted on an interview that he loved Spider-Man. He said he grew up loving the character Spider-Man, and when he found out that he was going to be Spider-Man in the new movies, it was a dream come true. He said he's going to continue to do it until he's old, and decided that he's in his early 20s. So that makes it very interesting. But now, since he's now Spider-Man's not going to be in the MCU, we're still hoping on the fact that if they're still negotiating a deal which has something involved in Spider-Man. But now, John Watts, he is the guy who directed Far From Home and I believe Homecoming. He has announced that two future films are on the way, but it's not going to be within the MCU. This is going to be a new story arc without the MCU, which I say that's bad. Guys, after when I found out that Sony doesn't want to strike a deal, it said that Disney wants more money because Disney has been participating less within Sony's movies. And also with him being in the MCU, it was one of the biggest accomplishments I think Sony should take, because with him being in the Marvel Universe, I mean, that's more money. And as you guys know, that Spider-Man Far From Home actually made over $1 billion right now. Sorry I'm using my hands so much. It's just that I don't want to go like this. Well, after that, it was really interesting. But I just wanted to... I talk with my hands, but not a lot. But it's just the fact that he's out of the MCU, fans are outraged, and I'm outraged too. I've seen a lot of Twitter pages stating that Since Sony is taking Spider-Man out of the MCU, I'm not going to watch these new movies that they're producing. But they should think about that for a second, because look, Sony had created an Oscar-winning animated film, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, without using Tom Holland. They used a different type of Spider-Man, which was Miles Morales, who played the newer version of Spider-Man. He was known as the Ultimate Spider-Man. And for them to do you saw how that worked, and it worked perfectly. It got an Oscar for Best Animated Film. It beat Disney. This was the first time that Disney ever lost in an animated film category, although sometimes they weren't nominated at that point. So it makes sense that Sony should give back Spider-Man to Disney, or sell it to them. They can create their own Spider-Man, a new Spider-Man universe. I mean, come on, with Miles Morales as the Ultimate Spider-Man, that they have something right there. And plus, guys, there's a lot of comics that Stan Lee has not owned. For example, as you guys may have known, next year we're going to see the new Marvel film, Morbius. Now, Morbius was a Spider-Man villain. The character's name was Michael Morbius. He is a Harvard scientist trying to find a cure to stop a plague, if I remember correctly, in Africa or somewhere, or Brazil, wherever he was from. As he took Spider-Man's blood, I'm depicting it off the Spider-Man the Animated Series, and used it and tested what the blood was about. But there were bats. There were vampire bats inside a clock tower where he was doing his experiments. The bat drank the blood, and he was zapped by a neogenic recombinator, which gave the lizard powers, and mutated him into Dr. Kirk Connors into a lizard. And now he transformed into a vampire with the suction cups on here that sucks the plasma out of the body. And that's going to be a good movie. It's like a Marvel horror film. Although the new Marvel horror film that we're about to see is Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse. So that's going to be something. I hope they do get him back. If not, Sony has made the worst mistake of their lives. I'm outraged. But only time will tell, guys. I have a feeling they'll come back. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more reaction, more gameplay. Drop some likes if you enjoyed this. Sorry I kept elaborating a lot more, but I'm upset. But I have a feeling that the negotiation will continue, and Sony will come to an agreement. And all I know, guys, we'll get them back. It's just a matter of time. And time is all we need. Alright, you guys. Thank you guys for watching. And don't forget, like I always say, stay positive and bring Spider-Man back, please.